Yeah, aloha everybody. I'm Chelsea Arnott. I am with the Department of Land and Natural Resources and primary support for our Hawaiian Invasive Species Council today. I'm joined with Elizabeth Spieth and Layla Kaufman, who are also with the Hawaiian Invasive Species Council over here on Maui. And we're very excited to be hosting this brown bag webinar today on biosecurity bills at crossover. Let's just give it a second here as folks are joining, and I want to make sure we get them spotlighted. Can I do that? Yeah, sure. So just a quick introduction for our speakers today. We have Christy Martin, the project manager with the coordinating group on Alien Pest Species, and Stephanie Easley, who is the CAGAPS legal fellow, joining us today. I've got to see them pretty much almost every day, every week for the last 3 weeks, because we've all been over at the state capitol, giving testimony and on a lot of great measures regarding invasive species this session. So this presentation will kind of give you a summary and overview of what's happening at the Capitol, and then also kind of going into more of those bigger bills. There's some really great bills, but there's a lot of information in them. So our CAGAPS team is here today to help us along, and really great to have everybody here. Just know that there's a chat on here, and I think not a Q&A, but there's a chat function. So if you do have questions, we'll have time at the end to put some questions out there. This is also scheduled as a meeting, so we can do raised hands, but through the course of the presentation, just keep your mic off so we don't get any background noise. And with that, I'll pass it over to Christy and Stephanie. Thanks so much for presenting today.
Yeah, aloha. Thank you so much for spending your lunch with us. Feel free to go ahead and eat. We will eat later. Christy Martin, Program Manager and Public Information Officer for the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species. And Stephanie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Easley, the legal fellow with the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so what we have is a PowerPoint. We'll share with you a little bit of the background information about how to participate in the legislative process. We won't go too deep into that, but we did want to introduce some of that for some that's new, some of you who it's new to. Then we'll dig into some of the bills. We're really going to focus on just a small number of bills because some of the bills are really meaty. But of course, as Chelsea said, if you have questions, you'll be able to go ahead. And if you wouldn't mind putting it in the chat first so we can quickly refresh ourselves and figure out which bill you're talking about, we'll be able to go ahead and take some questions at the end. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, you see that? All right, so just to the basics, thousands of bills get introduced each year, and a very small percentage of those, sometimes even less than 10%, make it through the legislative process to become a law. Each bill in its journey through the legislature gets referred to committees that it relates to, and it can die in after or at the hearings for each committee. And it has to go through committees and the committee process in each chamber. So if it's a House bill, it will have an HB designation. It has to go through all of the relevant committees on the House side. And then once everybody has a say in it, it then has to be heard by all of the relevant Senate committees. And we have a couple of graphics on that in just a minute. So it is a lengthy process to ensure public participation. And so for folks that are new to the process, you can start tracking, looking at the different bills. You can go to the legislative website. And I've highlighted the tab where you can look at the committees for the different bills where they'll be heard. And what I've done is I've looked at most of our bills and pulled out a few that are relevant to us. But first, just a graphic on the process. And thanks so much to the Public Access Room and Legislative Reference Bureau is the overarching office that puts together this graphic. So if your bill is introduced on the House side, you follow the arrows down. Well, it starts with an idea, right? We need this. Why isn't this a law? And then it gets hopefully turned into a bill and introduced on either the House or the side. It goes through a first reading. It gets referred to the different committees. Committee hearings get scheduled. And if it passes all of that, it gets read several different times. Then it goes to crossover, gets heard by the opposite end. And after all of this process, there can be changes to bills. So bill language coming out of these two separate but side-by-side processes can look very different in the end and very different from each other. And if needed, they will have a conference, selected members from each side, House and Senate, and they will agree on final language. And then hopefully, if it all goes well, then the final language will be hopefully voted on, agreed to, and then referred to the governor for signature. There's several ways that it can become a law. It can also get vetoed at that point. So where are we right now in the legislative calendar? Well, March 1st, right around the corner, is what we call first decking. And that is the deadline for a bill to pass second reading and get filed for the final committee that was referred to in its originating body. It's a House bill, and it got scheduled for a few different committees. It has to be scheduled by its final committee by this March 1st time. March 7th is when crossover happens. So a whole lot of things happen. The bills cross over to the other bodies. The other important deadline around this time is budget crossover. And so we've provided those two dates as well. However, we're in addition. My screen is, oh, there we go. It is really a detailed process. And if there's one thing I really learned about this process is that the public access room is your friend. If you have questions or if you're looking for resources, you don't know how to draft a letter of testimony, so definitely make use of that resource. I get a note here that my connection is unstable. So apologies if I suddenly drop off. Well, so what happened last year? Remember, bills start with ideas. Well, ideas are generated by what's happening. So what happened last year? Well, of course, we had the fires in Maui. And we're going to circle back around to that for some of our final slides. We also had a lot of little fire ant, LFA, spreading across Windward Oahu, including via plant nurseries and then being sold to the public. So that was big news. Hawaiʻi Ant Lab, that's HAL, had to furlough staff. They had to limit the hours that they were working because of their funding. The legislature in the spring, last session, made an appropriation to keep Hawaiʻi Ant Lab going because they are a critical function that isn't funded via agencies and the budget. Another happening that went on is coconut rhinoceros beetle made its way or was discovered on other islands besides Oahu. Made a lot of news. It's still making lots of news right now. Another issue that grabbed a lot of attention is not the legislative process, but the rulemaking process. And Hawaii Department of Ag entered into rulemaking for what we call Chapter 72, Hawaii administrative rules, and it was to amend some rather antiquated language to address the movement of pests on Oahu. So that rulemaking started and it then stalled out, and this raised a lot of concern. And then there was a lot of discussion about some of the other administrative rules that had also stalled right around middle of last year. So all of this led to all sorts of things, and there's a lot more going on, but suffice for one slide. there was a lot going on around the invasive species space. And so therefore, multiple biosecurity bills were introduced. And we have a link up here to DLNR's tracking for all of the bills that they're watching for related to invasive species. And you can check it out. They have their measured report. I've just simply screenshotted what we have for our CAGAPS report. We every year go in and highlight the bills that we want to at least pay attention to. We've got 8 pages on our tracking report. And you can build your own report if you'd like by going to the Capitol website and making an account for yourself, highlighting which bills you want tracked. And that way you can automatically, by the prevent button, get an update on where your bills are. Current status is there. The measure, it's highlighted because it's hyperlinked. You can see what the status is of the bill, who introduced it, what committees it was referred to, AGR, FIN, AN, WTL, and companion. Now, this deserves a little bit of explanation. Sometimes the legislature finds it important in both the House and the Senate, and they have bill language that mirrors. So the same language was introduced as a bill in the House and it has a HB designation. And it was also introduced, same exact language, on the Senate side, and it has an SB designation. So that final column on the right-hand side, you can see the bottom bill, HB 2537. The companion bill is SB 2558. So clear as mud so far. Let's move forward here. We have a lot of bills that are moving through, but what I did is pulled out which committees that are being that are hearing these bills, and some of these committees are a little bit different than what we normally see. So of course we have the Arts and Environment on the Senate side, and also Agriculture Ag and Environment on the Senate side, and Agriculture Food Systems on the House side. So they have different acronyms, AN, AGR. We'll be tossing those around just a little bit today. Important hearing that it has to get through. Usually the last hearing that it's scheduled for is going to be the money committees. So that's FIN, Finance, and Ways and Means for the Senate side, WHAM. So this is the point where I give it over to Stephanie to start talking about some of these bills.
Thanks so much, Christy. As Christy mentioned, we had a lot of bills to select from on what to present. The first slide is talking about funding for the Hawaiʻi Ant Lab. As Christy mentioned, a companion bill is when the same text is introduced in the House and the Senate. There was a bill to fund HAL that did that. It's HB 2132, so that's House bill, and then Senate bill 2359. It was referred to the Agriculture and the Money Committee in each chamber. And this bill is seeking $1.168 million for HAL. It's the purpose, we set out the purpose of each of the bills here. This, the second one does not have a companion. It was introduced only in the House, HB 2644. It went to the Agriculture and Finance committees, and then HB 2672 went to Agriculture and Finance. Each one provides funding for HAL, but for slightly different purposes and in different amounts. This one was seeking, HB 2132 is seeking $1.168 million to support HAL. It made it out of, the House bill made it out of the Agriculture Committee, but it is awaiting a hearing in Finance. And as Christy mentioned, if a bill is not heard in its committee, then it dies there. So this bill, the House version, unless the first deadline is March 1st, so unless a hearing notice comes out this afternoon, this bill will die in the Finance Committee. And the same fate on the Senate side. It made it through the Agriculture Committee without amendment, and it is waiting on a Ways and Means hearing. The middle column in our chart, this bill is seeking $777,000 for HAL. It has the purpose of recognizing HAL as the lead organization for addressing LFA in the state with the support of the Plant Pest Control Branch of Hawaii Department of Ag and seeking money. It also establishes 7 FTE positions on Oahu to address LFA infestation on Oahu. This one has made it out of the Agriculture Committee and passed the Finance Committee. So it is still alive and eligible, if it's passed by the full House, to cross over and be considered by the Senate committees. Our last bill had more of an agricultural focus. It was to protect crops and workers by appropriating money to HAL. There was no dollar amount in this bill. It passed out of the Agriculture Committee, but is waiting on a Finance Committee hearing, which again, unless there's a notice that comes out today, means that the only HAL funding bill still moving, still alive is HB 2644. So that's a lot of information. Let's go to the next one. So the big piece of legislation that was introduced both in the Senate and the House by Senator Keiko Lole and Rep. Matioshi is SB 3237 and HB 2758. It's called the Ag Omnibus Bill. It's 90 plus pages. It contains a lot of provisions that address in an omnibus holistic fashion, updating the statutes and responsibilities of the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. This one was referred, the Senate version, 3237, was referred to 4 committees. If it has a slash in between the committees, that means they can have a joint hearing on it. It was heard jointly by the Agriculture Committee and TCA. They both passed it. And then you can see here, when we practiced yesterday, it had not been scheduled for a Judiciary and Ways and Means hearing, so that would mean it would have died. But then a hearing notice came out last night. It is scheduled to be heard on Friday at 10:31 a.m. and they're not taking oral testimony. They are taking written testimony, which has to be submitted 24 hours in advance of the hearing. And I'll put a link to that hearing notice in the chat. So depending on what happens tomorrow, SB 3237 may still be alive. HB 2758 was referred to Agriculture, Consumer Protection, and Finance. It has passed all 3 of those committees. It was amended. So when a bill gets amended, if it's in the Senate, it gets an SD1. If it's in the House, it gets an HD1. It was amended by Ag with an HD1, amended by Consumer Protection with an HD2, and it passed Finance without amendment. So it's eligible to cross over to be considered on the Senate side. So that's the status of it. Let's talk about what's in it. Or the purposes of the bill. It sets out 2 purposes: to facilitate the control and eradication of invasive species and pests, and assist the Department of Agriculture in carrying out its responsibilities. And I think that second purpose really speaks to what the legislation is attempting to do. It is truly the legislature setting priorities and assisting the Department of Ag in carrying out its responsibilities. It's speaking to the legislature, speaking to the Department of Ag, saying, this is what we think is important. This is what we think needs to be addressed. So what does it do? There's 2 kinds of categories of changes made by the Ag Omnibus Bill. The first one is it changes some of Hawaii Department of Ag's regulations. Only the Hawaii Department of Agriculture has the authority to prevent something from being imported or quarantine it within the state or stop it from moving because it is a pest or because it's infested with the pest. The invasive species committees, the counties, homeowners, business owners, residents can apply chemical or mechanical treatments to stop a pest, but only HDOA has the authority to stop something from moving because it is a pest. And the omnibus clarifies that that authority includes human health and welfare, not just agriculture and the environment. Another really big change that it makes is it requires HDOA to update the list of pests designated for control or eradication once every 2 years. The current list is from 2008. It includes 89 taxa, some at the genus level, some are unnamed. Some are no longer high priorities for the state or no longer eligible to be or able to be controlled. They're just everywhere. And so one of the issues that business has is if you say, well, you have to control all these pests. If it's something that's widespread, that's everywhere, that they have no ability to control anymore, they can't, it's not possible for them to do it. And so how can they comply? So this bill says, well, HDOA, you need to make a small list of pests that are actually targets for Department of Ag control and eradication efforts. And under current law, they're supposed to have a detailed control and eradication plan for each species on the list. And again, 89 taxa, they don't have those plans. So hopefully this will result in a smaller, shorter list where they could have control and eradication plans for each one. One of the changes made by the omnibus that's gotten quite a bit of airtime is this next sentence. If HDOA does not formulate and carry out a control and eradication program for each of those designated pests, a county, an invasive species committee, or the Hawaiʻi Ant Lab may do so. So again, to be clear, the Department of Ag will make the list of pests and decide what goes on it. And then from that short list, they will decide if they have the capacity or whatever other demands they have, if they want to make a control and eradication program for that pest. And if they choose not to, only then would the authority be available to a county and invasive species committee or the Hawaiʻi Ant Lab. And the final kind of regulatory change it makes, it provides a new process to keep the noxious weed list up to date. It's similar to the process used in Washington State. It's a kind of a rolling process that would happen at set dates before the Board of Ag with public participation each year. And the reason this one's so important is there's a statutory prohibition on the importation or sale of noxious weeds. But the current list is from 1992. So I was in college and now I'm in my mid-50s. It's not, having a list that's that old doesn't provide the protection that is intended by the statute. So this new process will allow HDOA to keep it up to date. Next slide. So another sort of category of changes made by the Ag Omnibus Bill is closing the gaps in Hawaii's biosecurity. So not empowering HDOA to make regulations or saying how the regulations should be made. Instead, these are statutory changes included within the bill. And the first one here, I think, is one of the most important and one of the biggest gaps in Hawaii's biosecurity. It's a little confusing, but so the USDA, the Federal Department of Ag, sets up quarantines to prevent the movement of pests within the United States. So it prohibits certain regulated articles from moving between the states so that pests don't spread. And the one that concerns me that is the most interesting is citrus greening. It's a citrus disease that absolutely devastates citrus crops. There's no cure for it. The tree gets it, it stops making fruit, and then it dies. Only 2 states don't have documented, 2 citrus producing states don't have documented cases of this disease, and we are one of them. There's this huge new farming effort on Maui for citrus. And so we definitely don't want that disease to come and make that new effort unproductive. So USDA quarantines it, right? They say you can't move it. But when something from a quarantined area, for instance, in Florida, arrives in Hawaii, it's inspected by the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. And they don't have the jurisdiction to enforce a federal quarantine. It's like the, police shows on TV, like, do you have jurisdiction? Or you don't have jurisdiction. Our state agency cannot enforce a federal law. And there is no federal inspector at our border enforcing the domestic quarantines. So the omnibus bill prohibits something that is subject to a federal quarantine from being imported into Hawaii. So that would at least give the Department of Ag the authority to stop something that is subject to a federal quarantine when it reaches our state borders. The next change that it makes that we're highlighting is it authorizes HDOA to inspect items and baggage imported into Hawaii for pests. You're all probably familiar with the USDA inspection station when you're leaving Hawaii, going to the mainland. There is no, and they scan your bags and look for agricultural products and pests. So that's when we go from Hawaii to the mainland. There is no corresponding inspection when the items from the mainland come to Hawaii. The current regulations are only, or the current statute is only for agricultural products. The omnibus bill provides a mirror authority of the federal authority on the state side to protect Hawaii from pests arriving in the state. And it makes the penalties for pests found in those inspections a civil penalty. So it's not a crime. It's, you know, the intention of these inspections is to prevent the importation of pests, insects, and diseases. That was from an amendment, a suggested amendment made by the Attorney General's office that was accepted on the House side. And I think makes a lot of sense and makes those inspections less daunting and more targeted to what the intent of them is. It clarifies that HDOA can stop the sale of pest-infested merchandise. It actually includes many of the provisions that are in the Chapter 72 rules, administrative rules that Christy spoke about earlier that deal with the movement of pests within the state. It codifies them into statute, and it establishes a nursery licensing and inspection program. And so maybe you're thinking, well, if you can stop the sale of pest-infested merchandise, why do we need inspections of nurseries? And Chapter 72 and the stop the sale provision don't have any corresponding inspection authority. It allows HDOA to go into a public access area of a business and literally see the pest. And then you can stop the sale. It has the authority to stop the sale. The nursery licensing and inspection program is similar to nursery licensing and inspection programs used in other states, and similar to like the restaurant program here in Hawaii, where the department can actually inspect and then, you know, the non-public areas and actually inspect the business premises. Okay.
You know, before we move on, Stephanie, I'm going to go back over and cover the firewood one. So this omnibus bill would also require firewood imported into Hawaii to be heat treated. And this is stemming from the federal agency, USDA, deregulating the movement of wood based on emerald ash borer. Is that right? Emerald ash borer. Okay, so the feds said that they were going to stop regulating it. Other states then set in place requirements for heat treating so that they could protect their own states from pests that would move on firewood. And although Hawaii doesn't import a whole lot of firewood, we do import some. And for Hawaii to set up our own firewood requirement for heat treatment for firewood being imported into Hawaii protects Hawaii from being the only state that doesn't regulate it. Otherwise, we would leave ourselves open to receiving all sorts of reject firewood from other states. So I really appreciated Stephanie when she was telling me, you know, her rationale behind that. She did a lot of research into that. So thanks for letting me cover that.
Sorry, I skipped it. Thanks for filling in, Christy. So that is the Ag Omnibus Bill, kind of in a nutshell. This is, you know, Brownbag talk, so that's what we chose to highlight. I'm moving on to another piece of legislation that is being considered. This is the HDOA Biosecurity Bill. It is SB 2419, and the House version is 2619. It was referred to the Agriculture and Money committees in each chamber. It passed out of all of those committees, so both versions of this bill are still alive. It is seeking $2.5 million in funding to carry out HDOA's existing biosecurity program, which is set out in Part 6 of Chapter 150A, Hawaii Revised Statutes. That program was enacted into law in 2008 and allows the Department of Ag to have a separate biosecurity program. The purpose of this bill is on the next slide. Are we stuck? I think we are stuck. So, Christy?
We are stuck. I am pressing the button as much.
Okay. Well, this bill basically, here's the purpose. is to appropriate funds for the biosecurity program of HDOA to develop and implement projects to increase local agricultural production and lessen the entry of pests and prohibited or restricted organisms without a permit brought into the state on imported agricultural goods. So this is would be more money. $2.5 million is the request to carry out this purpose. So it's a much more targeted purpose than the Ag Omnibus bill, and it's funding for HDOA's existing programs. And I think that ends the, oh, Christy, you don't want to talk about that budget?
Yeah. Yeah, those are the bills we chose to highlight. And of course, we wanted to save lots of time for questions, but I wanted to bring this up. There's been a number of articles and news stories recently about the cost to the state budget related to supporting the people of Maui. And I wanted to highlight this. It was just in Sunday Star Advertiser, and I pulled out a section and highlighted it for you. But the state is spending a lot of money to support folks, and rightly so. However, it is really doing a number on the state budget. And so the reaction from legislators has been to search for ways to cut the state budget. So even existing programs they're looking to cut 15%. And for new proposals, I don't think there's a snowball's chance. Sorry to be blunt about that. So this is really sobering. And it puts a lot of parameters on what we might be able to accomplish. And so I just as we move forward in our discussion and some of the questions, keep that in mind. So I am going to, let's see, do I have another slide? Oh yeah, if you need to contact us, we're pretty findable. I'll leave this up here for a moment and then see if there are any questions.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, Christy and Stephanie, for giving us the overview of the legislative session, and then also walking us through some of those key biosecurity bills, especially the ones that are a little bit more hefty. But we got time for any questions, so you can feel free to add them into the chat box, or if you want, you can just raise your hand and you can unmute yourself once called on. You should have just posted this. Yeah. Hey, yeah, great. Go ahead, Karen or Karen.
Hi, thanks so much. I was a little bit late to join because I was attending the city council meeting. It seems like I need a full-time assistant to keep up. And so that's my question. Do you have anywhere where you've got, I mean, it helps when we testify, correct? Do you have any testifying guidelines? I mean, I was listening to a lot of what you said, but do I think I can formulate, useful testimony? Probably not before, the hearings coming up. So do you have any guidelines where we can follow along to submit testimony?
Yeah, I do for some. I think it will probably not be too easy to get substantive comments into a comment letter. We spend a lot of time analyzing language in the bills, and so it is, however, very helpful for whoever is chiming in, really to spend some time on why. What is your why for commenting on this? Prioritizing the protection of Hawaiʻi for whatever your reasons are. And so
Okay.
I would say at first cut, speak from your own experience. That is really what resonates with legislators.
Great. And it is a priority. So thank you so much.
Yeah, great question. Franny, you got the floor. Go ahead and ask your question.
I think my question probably follows along on what Karen just said. What are your recommendations for the most effective testimony, like, especially for those of us on neighbor islands, it's really hard to get to a hearing when it's only 2 days later and, getting over there on a plane. I mean, you have all these different committees and you have to submit your testimony to each committee, right? The committee, the testimony does not follow along. I have that correct, right? So every time you're submitting, is it sort of like do you have like a hierarchy of ways that testimony is submitted? Like is it worth it to do oral testimony? And when is that, how do you prioritize that decision making?
Yeah, thank you so much, Franny. Yeah, it's what part of the fire hose do you want to drink from, honestly. And the legislative website is really there to help. They have spent a lot of time working on the background tools to be able to support our needs, right? And so spend a little time going into the website. You can actually type in the number of your bill that you are interested in tracking, and request automatic hearing notices. So as soon as it comes out, then you will get it sent to your inbox. I would choose just a handful of bills to start with, and do it that way. Related to testifying, one of the good things that came out of COVID, it was a horrible situation for so many. But one of the silver linings that came out of it is the opportunity and the streamlining of video testimony, right? It has equalized, it has given the ability for anybody to participate, whether you're in the state or even, zooming in from Oregon, wherever. And they do.
So you would recommend that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In person is great when you can, if you can. The next priority would be video testimony. Of course, you have to submit written testimony in order to provide Zoom testimony. And then, right, but all it has to do, there's a form where you upload your testimony on the website that says letter only, letter and verbal testimony, and Zoom only, right? Or so in person, that sort of thing. So it will let you choose. And when you're filling out that form, you don't necessarily need to upload a whole letter on your letterhead. Of course, it's great if you have the time and can do it. But you can also just type into that little Word box, I support this because biosecurity is really important. And then click that you want to provide verbal testimony. And you'll be able to get that opportunity to do that. And in the meantime, you can, formulate your more deeper detailed comments if you want. Hope that helps, Franny.
And I'll
Absolutely.
by saying that each committee is its own decision-making entity, and it can die. Each committee votes whether to continue, whether to take amendments on it, and whether to pass it. So if you do have testimony on a bill that's important to you, you can just submit it to each committee. But as you noted, it doesn't follow along. So you can just upload that same, letter, just change the names and have it be in front of each committee.
Great. Yeah, that's a great question, great responses to help guide testimony for folks. Lee, I see you have your hand up. You want to ask your question? Hi.
Hi, yeah, thank you very much. I was really excited to see the point about firewood regulations and building in a requirement for heat treatment for firewood moving onto the islands from the contiguous United States. I'm wondering from both Stephanie and Christy, I should introduce myself because that's the nice thing to do, isn't it? My name's Lee Greenwood. I'm the Forest Pest and Pathogen Program Director for the Nature Conservancy, which is a program that extends across all of North America, and that includes Hawaii. But I'm coming to you from Montana right now, which is why it's dark here and not there. So I'm curious from Christy and Stephanie, what do you think is the prospect of that heat treatment restriction moving forward? Because to my understanding, it would not be a budget modification. And Christy, I understand greatly the sensitivity towards budget increases, but perhaps something that doesn't have a dollar amount has better prospects. So I'd just love to hear your take on the potential advancement of that. And the other budget neutral items, like the change in the ability for Hawaii to enforce a federal quarantine violation, which I think is spectacularly important. And I was happy to see that one too.
Yeah, thanks so much for chiming in, Lee, and thank you for joining us. It's really hard to comment on whether or not the legislature will continue to pass these along. It is in a really detailed 90-page bill with a lot of priorities, and so it will all depend on how successful legislators are at maybe separating out those that have costs. This is so low cost that I think they would need to publish it on their website. It would be great if they could communicate with importers of firewood, which we have a list available for the Department of Ag to do that. So really the cost of some stamps, maybe. That's how protective and easy this would be to pass. And what the heck, CAGAPS will buy the stamps if we need it. So, so yeah, we hope that the legislators really are able to understand some of these points. They are complex, and who would even be able to understand that citrus one, for example? It is because we see the federal agents down at the airport all the time. And everybody knows that they inspect things going out. So a lot of people don't realize that USDA, Federal Department of Ag, does not inspect incoming domestic sourced items. This is solely Hawaii Department of Agriculture. And unless the Hawaii Ag can do that, is able to enforce that, or at least have the authority to enforce it, whether they do or do not, that is going to be the question. It's complex. We try to communicate as much as we can. We're always available for answering questions of legislators if they do care to reach out. Of course, we're always there, and we never stand on our testimony. We always provide detailed comments. So I don't know. We'll see. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks for joining us, Lee. Lee is the one who helped me understand the issue of firewood through her work with the Don't Move Firewood, and has addressed the CAGAPS HISC Prevention EDR working group on this topic. And thanks for joining us today, Lee. Nice to see you.
Thank you, guys. I'm really pleased to see that at least this is included, whether or not it makes it to the final finish line. We can try and try again if we have to, but it's really exciting to see it right now.
Might I ask, Lee, you know, that March 1st hearing deadline is coming up, and you are welcome to provide a letter of testimony.
Is that Friday? We'll talk about it.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Reach out to me afterwards.
They're not accepting oral testimony, so the deadline to submit your written testimony, if you are interested in providing testimony on the bill, is tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. So this brown bag was very well timed.
Got some hands raised. Chelsea, are you? Okay. I will chime in there. Franny, you have your hand up again, and I'm sorry if somebody else had their hand raised before, but it's a little tough to navigate.
No, I think I just didn't take it down.
Okay. All right. Next up is Keith Weiser.
Hi, I was just wondering with the SB 3237, sort of redefining or refining the responsibilities of the Department of Ag, has there been any opposition inside the legislature voiced against this? I can guess some of the legislators who are in favor of this, but is there any opposition, and what are the arguments?
There has been some testimonies submitted in opposition to the bill, and there have been a few no votes as it goes through the different committees. It is a big bill. It does a lot. One of the issues that I was made aware of is, Hawaii Island has been left out of a lot of the conversations. Now LFA is on Oahu, and so there's a big push to give HAL resources on Oahu. And so, I think one of the ways that the bill will help Hawaii Island is that part that I talked about earlier, having that small list of pests for control and eradication that H2A is actually going to have plans for. Those plans would address each island and what could be done on each island. And so that Hawaii Island isn't just forgotten.
And let me chime in there on that as well. Keith, some of the opposition has been honestly from the Government Employees Association because they feel like they're taking jobs from state agencies, and really the point of this and authorities from the state agency, but really what the intention of this particular section of the bill intends to do is help the department, first of all, cut its 80-90 list down to a handful. And if they don't have either the capacity, the bandwidth, or whatever it is that they cannot accomplish their program of control for, then all of those processes that the department would use for contacting a landowner and getting access and all of that could then be used by a county, right? Because Department of Ag is the only one with the authority to be able to regulate the movement of pests, either coming in or moving around the island. And if the Department of Agriculture says, well, we just don't have the capacity to do this, but it's a high priority, it's on our list, it needs to be done, then it would allow the counties, for example, to step in and say, well, it's a high priority for us. We definitely do have some bandwidth to do that. We would definitely be able to use this process for notification, for access, and all of that. So ultimately, it's a security net for some of those handful of really high priority species that if just because the department doesn't have the ability to do everything that they need to do, which is a lot, we still have a chance to be able to address it as a wider community of practice. So I hope that helps, Keith.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, we got dropped here at Maui High. Karen, did you ask your question already?
I put my hand up again.
Okay.
So while we've been on you answering questions, I've been on your website, on your Instagram page, and on the state legislature page. Is there somewhere where it easily lists the things and whether the Sierra Club opposes or supports? I couldn't find it. And I wasn't taking notes because I just figured.
Yeah, no, Karen. Your questions are spot on and very, very much appreciated. I think we have not been able to do that on our website. Our list has changed a number of times, and so it's been difficult. So the DLNR list, which we provided, and we can put back into the chat if you'd like, is
Thank
there.
you. Yeah, I missed that.
Yeah, so the Sierra Club, really, we've been able to work closer with them this year. We used to work very close together on testimony and would share notes. But I think we're rebuilding that network. And so this is our learning year. So I appreciate you asking those good questions. And we are trying to make sure that priority legislation, and honestly, I think we're focused right now on the omnibus bills because there's so many detailed pieces in there. I think that Sierra Club has been successful at communicating on those. I'm not sure if hearing notice has been posted for those.
And I guess, sorry, that's what I was looking at. I was looking at the Sierra Club Instagram page. And so they had a few weeks ago or something, they had a certain bill and said opposed it, but it's too late for that one. And so literally, it just needs to be that easy when life is this full, and I just need to get it done before the deadline.
Yeah, and
So
it is,
thank you.
Right on.
it is a short deadline. They come out like 48 hours in advance, and then you have to have your testimony in 24 hours in advance for it to be timely. And I see Wayne Tanaka from the Sierra Club put something in the chat. I don't know, Wayne, if you
Thank you.
want to talk about what you guys have available for resources.
Hi, yeah, this is Wayne Tanaka with the Sierra Club. Just want to say thank you so much to Stephanie and Christy for putting this together. It's been super informative, and for all of their work, behind the scenes, getting us this far, especially with the omnibus measures. I did put in the chat a link to our Capitol Watch blog. We try not to blast every single bill that we weigh in on, just because it tends to wear people out. As Christy said, it's a fire hose. It's drinking from the fire hose situation. But priority bills that I think can communicate to the legislature what issues the community really cares about. In this case, including our need for invasive species and pests, control and eradication measures. It hopefully can help the community engage. And so we do have some sample testimony. Encourage folks to add your own stories. Add your own, as Christy says, your why as to why we really need the kinds of protections we've been discussing, and basic how to submit testimony on a particular bill. And feel free to share that too with others who aren't on this call and who might be interested in dealing with this pretty existential crisis that we're facing, and not just us, but our future, our KK and our future generations.
And so I did go to your Capitol Blast page. Thank you. And it the one that I saw, it doesn't list the bill numbers. It really needs. I really need to know like what we talked about today, but I didn't write down the bill numbers and which one are we for and which one are we against. I mean, literally, I just need to be able to have that as a reference so I can at least put in a support or opposed testimony. And I'm sorry to keep asking the same thing over and over again. I just can't quite find it.
Okay, yeah. That's I'll take that back, and we have. It might be good, especially after crossover, for us to list out all of the bills that we have been advocating for. And of course, it's just a few of us, right? So we're not going to hit everything on every issue, but we try to focus on some of the key systemic solutions. But yeah, thank you, Karen. I'll work
whatever
on
we're focused on. I will go along. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yep. Karen, you're keeping us honest. It's awesome. What else do we have here? I love seeing all your names.
I don't see anybody. I had a question for Christy and Stephanie. So regarding the omnibus bill and all the provisions and all the things that it does it include an appropriation to kind of build the capacity needed at Department of Ag, or is there any kind of funding attached to it? And any thoughts on that?
No, it does not have an appropriation attached. However, it does have costly elements if it were to be enacted. For example, one part of it is the nursery registration program. Right? That would require a little bit of doing, even though the nurseries would be asked to pay a $25 fee to get a nursery license. It would require the Department of Ag to go and inspect to see if there's best management practices in place to manage certain priority pests before they could receive their license. But honestly, we are at the point, right? And I have to say, I don't think anybody, and none of us, certainly I didn't expect this bill to reach this far. But there's a lot of appetite for discussing the issues. And I think that that's what the legislators are using it for, to get informed on what some of the issues are. So, so it is definitely got some measures in there that would require an appropriation. but spurring some discussion, is there an aspect of this program that would be low cost that we might be able to keep on a bill if it gets modified and continues to move forward? That is a first step. And so, you know, as far as fantastic, imperfect bills are, I mean, this has been a real sort of dark horse. If I were to mix my metaphors, didn't expect it to get this far. It started really amazing conversations, and who knows where it's going to go. But yeah, Stephanie, you got something on that one?
Just it's taken real leadership on both sides. It has excellent introducers who are aware of these issues and raising them to this level of attention. And there is no appropriation. That is what the Hawaii Department of Agriculture in its comments has raised. You know, how could we do this? So we'll just have to see if it continues to move forward, if it moves forward with all of the parts of it, or if lower cost parts continue to move forward and the big budget items don't. We just have to wait and see. Like Christy said, I never thought that it would be here, you know, looking at crossover. So it's exciting.
Yeah, that's great. Lots of momentum around invasive species during this session. We probably have time for one more question, and then I want to save the last few minutes to just have Christy and Stephanie give us some words of wisdom at the end here. Send us on our way to do what we can.
Any last questions? And of course, Stephanie and I are available to take calls or emails. And we're happy to talk with you a little bit more in detail about some of these bills or some of the other ones that we haven't mentioned. As I said, our tracking report is 8 pages long. So yes, there's no shortage of bills with different and somewhat tricky language out there. Happy to try and help on those.
Thanks so much. Well,
Last minute question.
I'm so happy we answered everybody's questions.
I know. Well,
there's probably more that will come after. And I mean, I see a real appetite for this information. So, I mean, I think it would be great if we have a recap after the session ends for this group again, maybe through this Brownbag forum. And I mean, I think this would be a great annual webinar to have during each session. And hey, Patrick, go ahead, ask your question. Good to see you.
You know, near the last week, there was like 11 bills that I was like, oh my God, I gotta, you know, send things in. But you know, is it okay if we, I mean, is it okay if we just write, oh, in support, you know, and, you know, send it on? Because I mean, a lot of times I'm like, I don't have time. I don't have time to write a whole, you know, thing about it. But you know, often I'm a little overwhelmed, but I'm like, I really think this is a good idea. So I'm just like, so.
Well, that question,
yeah, thanks
for my words of wisdom, which are, when I'm relatively new to Hawaii, I moved here in 2018. And when I learned that anyone can submit testimony and get their 2 minutes in front of these state legislature to say what their opinion is on each piece that is being heard, I mean, it's marvelous. It is marvelous that the legislature provides that opportunity. And so just going, you know, you don't have to take your 2 minutes, just going on the website and clicking use support, because people who are opposed will go on and click I oppose. And so just having your voice, having that opportunity is amazing. And I hope that people do take it for any bills that they're interested in, because it is marvelous.
Yeah, our access to legislators is amazing, and we shouldn't take it for granted in Hawaii. So all of the efforts to keep the legislators and the building open, okay, we have to go through security now, but that's fine because we still get that time, that face-to-face, that connection, because we're all members of the same island, right? And so having that access, having that direct say is super important.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for setting them up, Pat. And they're knocking them down. So I think those are some great words of wisdom to leave this brown bag with. Just to let you folks know, this was recorded. We will be posting this webinar or presentation meeting, whatever we're calling it, to our HISC YouTube page. So if you folks came in late, or maybe you have friends or coworkers that missed it, it will be posted to our HISC YouTube page. And so you can reference some of those bills Christy and Stephanie mentioned. But as they said, they're available if you want to chat more or just have more questions about the process. Here to support that. So mahalo everybody for joining. Great to see everybody. Thank you again, Christy and Stephanie, for taking the time out of a really busy time of year to provide this information for everyone.
Well, thank you for having us. It was really fun.
Aloha.
Mahalo.